Thank you, Gentry. Good afternoon, church. It's good to see you, everyone here. Let's dive right in. When I was 18, my family and I were moving from Alabama to Nebraska, and we left a car when we moved. We left a car in Alabama, got to Nebraska. So I was 18 years old. I had to drive this truck from Nebraska to Alabama by myself, hitch up the trailer with the car on it, drive all the way back to Nebraska. Okay. Oof. A lot of things went wrong on that trip. A lot. There's one specific thing that I will never forget. So I'm driving 70 miles an hour down the interstate, pulling this car on this trailer, and then out of nowhere, bam, rear tire blows in the truck. And instantly, the truck loses traction and starts spinning around and around. And there's nothing I could do. I couldn't steer out of it. I couldn't brake out of it. All my driving, all my instincts, completely useless. Just nothing. I just had to white knuckle hold onto the wheel for dear life and just wait for it to be over. When the truck finally slid to a stop, dust everywhere. The windows were down. It was super hot. Everything was just covered in dust. Then I looked around and I noticed the place that I spun off the road was the only place in a 5-mile stretch in either direction where there were no trees. There were trees lining the highway, except for that one abandoned rest stop that I spun off. I might have gone headfirst into a stand of trees if I had spun out 2 seconds sooner or 2 seconds later. But I'll never forget that feeling. Completely out of control. Everything you know how to do suddenly useless. And life has a way of putting us in that situation, doesn't it? This last chapter of 1 Peter is written for exactly these moments. But what it tells us to do when we get there, it might not be what you expect. So as we've been walking through 1 Peter together, we've seen how the resurrection of Jesus gives us a living hope. We've talked about who we are because of that living hope, chosen, belonging to God. We've talked about how to actually live. How do we live that out in a world that doesn't understand us, right? We're not part of this world. How do we keep doing good when it's really hard? And how do we keep going when following Jesus brings suffering? So chapter 5 is the last stop, and it pulls all of this together, and it leaves us with 3 things: a challenge, an encouragement, and a promise. Now, the Peter who wrote this is not the same Peter, the young, brash Peter from the early days. This is Peter as an old man. He's near the end of his life. He's in Rome under Nero, and in a few years, he's going to be executed for his faith. So he's not writing theory from a safe distance. He gets it. He's writing to hurting people. These are scattered groups of believers who, by becoming Christians, they walked away from the way that everybody around them lived, and they got shamed, and they got shut out for it. And people were wondering, should we just give up? And Peter tells them, nope on a rope. That was just for Jay. Peter says your suffering is not strange, and it's not the end of your story either. You belong to God, and you have a hope that nobody can take away from you. So, chapter 5. Here's the first thing, the challenge. So, for a scared, hurting church, this is a weird one. Peter doesn't say toughen up or fight back. He says the opposite, and he starts with the leaders in verse 1. It says, "So I exhort the elders among you, as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed." So Peter starts with the leaders. He refers to them as elders. This is the language of recognized shepherd leaders in the churches. It's not the full formal structure and office of elder that we have today, but it's the ones trusted to lead and care for the flock. Peter calls himself a fellow elder. Now let's stop and think about who's saying that for a minute. This is Peter. He's an apostle. He was with Jesus. He is the rock. Oh, sorry, wrong rock. Okay, yeah, thanks. So for a man who is not, Jesus himself handed Peter this authority. He could have picked up that authority, swung it around like a bat, and smacked people into line, right? But he doesn't do that. Instead, he sets it down, gets it down on their level, and he says, I'm one of you. This is where, for a man not known for his humility, this is something worth noticing. Something changed in Peter from the beginning, early days of his life towards the end. Now hold that thought, because we're going to come back to it. In verse 2 it says, shepherd the flock of God that's among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but by being examples to the flock. So Peter tells these shepherds how to actually do the job, and it's striking how much of what he says it's not about the actual work, it's about the heart behind the work. He gives 3 quick contrasts. The first one is, don't do it because you're forced to. Do it because you want to. The second one, don't do it for what you can get out of it, but because you actually care. And the third, don't do it by throwing your weight around, but by being an example that people want to follow. Now, let's feel the weight of that first one just for a second. This is not just for pastors and leaders. This is for anybody serving anybody. It's not because you are forced to, but because you want to. And how many times have you thought, I'm going to go volunteer? But it's because I feel kind of guilted, I feel obligated, I really should do that, because that's what people do, right? I'm in the church I serve. When serving is only ever a have to do this, it quickly sours, and then something that you used to love turns into resentment. What Peter's after is a shift from that I have to do it to, instead of an attitude of I get to do this. I have the opportunity to do this. It's the same exact task, but now there's a completely different heart behind it. When you remember who you're actually serving and what he already did for you, the have to turns into a get to. Now, I'm not saying that the work stops being work. A chore is still a chore. You can be up to your elbows in something hard, but you can still be doing it with joy. What changes is not the task. What changes is the why underneath it. When I was a kid, I hated chores. Hated them. They were the worst. I mean, probably most kids, right? But I don't mean like I mildly disliked them. They were the worst thing in the entire world. My mom could not figure out how to motivate me. She could not. She tried a lot of things. Until one day, she discovered the most powerful motivational tool known to mankind, star stickers. She made a chore chart, and then if we did our chores without grumbling or complaining to the standard that she expected, we would get a star. And if we filled up a whole row of stickers, we would get to go out for ice cream. But here's the thing. I didn't even care about the ice cream. I just wanted the stickers. The chores didn't change. Mopping is still mopping. We had to clean the toilets inside and out. Ugh. What changed was that all of a sudden there was a reward that I actually wanted. And that flipped the whole thing on its head. And so Peter does the same thing for these elders he's talking to. After he tells them how to serve, he holds up the reward. It's not a sticker, and it's not ice cream. Look at verse 4. When the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Now, the word for crown here is it's not the one you'd use for a king's crown with jewels and diamonds and rubies. No, the word Peter picks is Stephanos. This was the wreath that they would put on the winner at the Olympics. And yes, those ancient Olympic Games were run during Peter's day. They ran through his lifetime. The wreath was the ancient version of a gold medal during those Olympics. But here's the catch. They wove those wreaths out of leaves. They were made out of olive leaves or laurels. So the trophy for the biggest win of your life was a bunch of braided leaves that you'd wear for a few days, and then it would start turning brown and wilting just after a few days. You'd win the whole thing, and then by the end of it, your prize was just sitting in the trash. And honestly, isn't that everything that the world gives us? Shiny for a minute, and then it fades. We're so used to it that we actually learn to dress the fading up, and we call it a good thing. We take something old and worn out and we call it vintage. Now, I have to be really careful because my wife loves vintage things. But we talk about the patina. The wearing down is some kind of achievement. We've invented words to make it sound like a feature, but it's still just fading. So that's why Peter's extra word matters so much, unfading. And the Greek word here is amarantinos, and it comes from the amaranth, which is a flower that ancient Greeks believed would never wither. The crown that the chief shepherd hands you will never wilt. It will never fade. It never ends up in the trash. Jesus is the only one handing out a reward that does not lose its shine. So here's the challenge for all of us, because we all serve something. Don't wear yourselves out chasing rewards that fade. Don't do it for the credit or the thank you. Don't do it to get noticed, because all of that is just a wreath of leaves. It looks green and beautiful for a week, and then it browns and falls apart. Serve for the one reward that actually lasts, from the one shepherd who's actually coming back. Serve for his well done, good and faithful servant. And hear me, that well done is not a prize handed to you by a reluctant boss. This is the gracious welcome of Christ, the chief shepherd who first served us. He gave himself for us. He's the very one who makes our joyful service possible in the first place. So then Peter turns from the leaders to everybody else. In verse 5, likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So this isn't an eldership thing anymore. Now it's all of us. And he reaches for this great word, clothe yourself. The Greek for that it's that. I'm not going to try to pronounce that word. I'm not a Greek scholar. But that word points to one specific piece of clothing, and it's the apron that a servant would tie on when they got to work. This was the thing that marked you out as a servant. The one who serves was the piece of clothing. So Peter didn't grab this word by accident. He had watched someone put this apron on before. On the last night, in the upper room, Jesus got up from the table. He took off his outer robe. He wrapped a towel around his waist, got down on the floor to wash his friend's feet. And Jesus was being a household servant in that moment. And Peter was sitting right there watching this whole thing unfold. So when Peter says, clothe yourself with humility, I think Peter can still see it. In his mind's eye, in his memory, Peter can literally picture Jesus tying the apron on to serve the ones around him. That is the example that Jesus set. No one is going to make you do it. You tie the apron on yourself. But that night in the upper room, Peter did not take it very well. If you'll remember, when Jesus got down and reached for his feet, Peter pulled them back and he said, Lord, no, you're not washing my feet. Now, John 13, which is where that passage is written, doesn't actually tell us why Peter pulled his feet back. So I'm reading into it a little bit here, but bear with me. I think I get it because I know this feeling in my own heart. Pride is one of the flesh patterns that I struggle with. I'm really good at admitting how prideful I am. See the irony there? Part of Peter is probably thinking, whoa, no, you're the God of the universe. You're not washing my feet. That's backwards. I know how this is supposed to work. It's not this. But if I'm being honest, I think there's another part underneath that one, and it sounds more like, my feet are dirty. Ugh. I don't want you seeing them. I don't even want to look at my own feet. They're dirty. Ugh. I don't want you down there in the grime. Let me clean up first. And then you can wash my clean feet. I'll clean them up first. And isn't that so much of our pride? We don't want to be seen in the mess. We want to hand Jesus the cleaned up version, the Sunday church version, the we've got it all put together version. But look at what Jesus says back to Peter. He says, if I do not wash you, then you have no part with me. No share with me, Jesus says. In other words, Peter, you don't get to keep the dirty parts to yourself. That's not how this works. You don't get to clean up first. You don't have to clean up first. You either let Jesus wash you, mess and all, or you're not really in this. That right there, that is the humility that Peter's talking about. It's not just serving other people. It's letting God see the parts that you want to hide and letting him wash those parts. And here's what gets me. Peter, of all people, is the one telling us to put on humility because he had to learn it the hard way. He learned it the hard way over and over again. This is the same Peter who, when the soldiers showed up to arrest Jesus, he grabbed a sword and he cut a man's ear clean off. Because his first instinct was always to reach for the sword, grab the wheel, fix it himself by force if he had to. I'm the rock. And this is the same Peter who, on that last night, looked Jesus in the eye and he insisted, everybody else might bail on you, Lord, but not me. I will die first. That's what Peter said to Jesus. And then just a few hours later, a servant girl asks Peter, hey, aren't you one of Jesus' guys? 3 times Peter says, no, I never knew the man. And he gets so angry, he swears at her. I don't know him, leave me alone. So what changed in Peter from that version to the man that we have in chapter 5 at the end of his life? How do you get from the guy who chopped a man's ear off and disowned Jesus 3 times to the one writing to us about tying on the apron? It was grace. Grace changed him. After the resurrection, the risen Jesus went and he found Peter. And instead of lecturing Peter and holding it over him, you denied me 3 times. Instead of doing that, he just asks Peter the same question 3 times. Peter, do you love me? And Peter responds, yes, you know that I do, Lord. And Peter says, shepherd my sheep. 3 times. This was one for each denial. One for each of the times that Peter denied him. Jesus asked, do you love me? Now, follow the trail. The word that Jesus used that morning when he tells Peter, shepherd my sheep, is the same exact word that Peter uses in this letter when he's telling the elders to shepherd the flock of God. Do you see it? The command that put Peter back together by Jesus directly is the same command that Peter is handing to us. He isn't lecturing us from a pedestal high and mighty. He's saying, I've been there. I know how this feels. He was restored by Jesus, and he shows us the way. So when Peter tells us to clothe ourselves in humility, it's not a guy who read about it in a book. He watched his own pride get blown up in the worst way possible, and then he got put back together by grace. And that's the only way. So let's look at the second half of verse 5. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So this is a short verse. It's easy to move past this verse quickly, maybe partially because it's kind of scary sounding when you think about it. God is not neutral about pride. He responds to it. And he responds to pride into humility in completely opposite directions. To the humble, God gives grace, favor, help. He leans in close. But to the proud, the word there is stronger than you would expect. The Greek word is antitacetai, which means to oppose or to line up against. This is a militaristic word. Picture an army lining up for war opposite you, and you're about to do battle. Sit with that for a second. When you dig your heels in and insist on running your life the way that you want to on your own strength, you insist on missing out. You don't just miss out on God's help. You set yourself against God in a battle that you cannot win. Let's be clear. So that's the challenge, okay? But right in the middle of it, Peter hands us an encouragement. Verses 6 and 7. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. So there's that therefore. And since you can't win a fight against God, don't start one. Humble yourself instead. Get low, get under his hand, and let him be the one to lift you up. This would be in his timing and not ours. That's probably the hardest part. But here's something that I didn't notice for a really long time. We tend to read verses 6 and verse 7 as two separate things. Verse 6, be humble. Verse 7, don't be anxious. These are two different topics, almost two completely different sermons the way that I was reading this verse. Maybe you read it the same way. But in the original, this is all one sentence. Humble yourselves, casting all your anxieties on him. The word casting is hooked directly into the humble yourselves. It's not a brand new command. It's telling you how you do the first one. You want to know what humbling yourself actually looks like on a normal Tuesday? It looks like handing God your anxiety. And if that's true, let's flip that over for a second. That means that if casting your anxiety on God is how you humble yourself, then holding on to your anxiety, clutching it, insisting on carrying that weight yourself, is actually a form of pride. I suspect most people don't think of anxiety as pride. I certainly didn't before. We think of it as weakness, or I'm just wired that way. I'm just an anxious person. But stick with me here. I think Peter is onto something that's super important for us. Here is the connection. When you insist on carrying all of that weight yourself, what you're really saying underneath all of this is that I got it. I'm the one holding it all together. If I don't carry this burden, nobody else will. I'm the only one who cares enough to carry this burden that I'm holding. And do you hear what that actually is? That's us trying to climb into God's chair, trying to make ourselves the one in charge of outcomes that we were never built to control. And of course that makes us anxious. You're trying to run a universe that was never yours to run in the first place. So pride and anxieties, they turn out to be the same thing, like two sides of the same coin. Pride says it all depends on me, and the second it all depends on you, how could you not be anxious? Humility says the opposite. It depends on God, and he actually cares about me. That is not weakness, that's relief. You finally get to set the weight down. Oh, so heavy. It was never ours to carry in the first place. And this is exactly what Jesus invites us into. In Matthew 11, Jesus tells us, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus doesn't promise you'll carry nothing. He says, stop hauling around this crushing weight that you've strapped onto yourselves and take on his yoke instead. Because his is light, especially compared to the heavy burden that we put on ourselves. Notice how Jesus described himself right in the middle of that invitation. He says, gentle, lowly in heart. He's describing humility and saying, learn from me. This is who I am. This is who you should also be. Now, let's be honest for a second. We are an anxious people, right? Modern society invites anxiety like nothing else. This area especially. Preston last week shared about Maryland drivers. They cause me anxiety. In the Northern Virginia area, I'm not sure there's ever been a more anxious time to be alive than right now. And there's a reason for that. We carry it around in our pockets. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. Nobody actually stops casting their anxiety somewhere. You're always going to throw that weight at something. Some of us throw it at control. Some of us throw it at building a bigger bank account. Some of us throw our anxiety at what's in the bank account, spending it on things. Retail therapy, anyone? Yes. Amen. Some throw it at their phone, doom scrolling until they go cross-eyed. Some at drinks, some at food, some at getting everybody around them to approve. You're going to cast your anxiety on something. That is the reality. That was never really the question. The only question is, can the thing that you're about to cast your anxiety onto actually hold on to it or not? And that's why Peter adds those 4 words at the end of verse 7. Cast your anxieties on him because he cares for you. That is the reason that God can take the weight when nothing else can. He actually cares about you. He actually cares, and everything else that you throw your anxiety at does not. It will eventually crack under the weight of what you throw at it. But he won't. So if casting our anxiety on God is what we're meant to do, why is it so hard? Why do we keep holding on to this weight when we know there's somebody stronger standing right there with his hands open saying, give me that, I got it. You can hand that to me. No, I got this, Lord. It's fine. Why do we do that? I think it's because deep down, we're not totally sure we believe it, to be frank. We're not really sure his plan is good. We're not even sure if God has a plan. Something bad happens, and the question underneath everything is, how could God's plan be good if he let this thing happen? How is this God's plan? And when we're anxious, that doubt usually shows up as one of 2 lies. The first lie is that God's not able. He's not really in control. The wheels are off. Nobody's driving. The second lie is that God doesn't care. Maybe he can do something, but he's distant. He's not paying attention to little old me. He's busy. He's got more important things to do than help me with whatever, this thing. But watch how Peter shuts down both of these lies in verses 6 and 7. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. To the first lie, Peter says, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. The mighty hand. This is the hand that holds the entire universe together. Every star, every atom, your very next heartbeat is in the palm of his hand. And we get the chance to crawl underneath that. He is more than able to hold whatever it is that you're carrying. He can handle it. And to the second lie, Peter says, cast your anxieties on him because he cares for you. He cares. He's paying attention to you specifically. You need both of those things to actually let go. Think about it. If God were powerful but cold, then giving him your fear would be terrifying. And if he were kind but weak, well, then handing your anxiety to him would be pointless because he couldn't do anything about it. But Peter says he is both strong enough to carry the whole thing and loves us so much that he wants to. And here's a detail that I love. The word that Peter uses for casting is not a passive thing. It's not like I'm going to kind of tiptoe up to God and just slide this over. No, it's the same word that was used when the disciples threw the blankets over the donkey when they were going into Jerusalem. That's the word. Heaving it on. But you might be thinking now, okay, But how? How are you supposed to cast an anxiety onto God? What does it look like on a random weekday when your chest is tight and you can't sleep and you've got that anxiety video scrolling in your head on a loop? First, name the thing. Name it out loud. Not a vague, God, please be with me today. No, that's something that you see on a mug. That's not what you need to do. Declare it out loud, the cancer diagnosis, the bill you don't know how to pay, the stress because my kid just punched a hole in the wall. What am I supposed to do, Lord? Name it out loud. Secondly, when that anxious story starts running in a loop on your head, it's all on me. I can't keep it together. It's all going to fall apart. Instead, answer that with what is true. The truth. God cares. He is the one holding the universe together. You're not holding anything together. None of us are holding it together. He's the only one that can. You're not ignoring your fear. You are taking every thought captive. That's what this means. Take those thoughts captive. And third, don't do it by yourself. Tell somebody. Let another believer get under that weight with you and pray. Isolation is where anxiety wins every single time. Every time. Some of you are carrying something right now that you've never once said to anybody else in your life. And the enemy loves that. That's right where he wants you, all by yourself. And fourth, this isn't a once and done kind of scenario. You don't just get to do it one time and then, oh, cool, I'm done. I figured it out. I'm done. I'm good for the rest of my life. Nope. You're going to have to hand it over in the morning and then realize by lunchtime, oops, you picked it back up again. And then you're going to have to cast it back off again, repeatedly. This is the practice. It's not you failing. This is you practicing. You cast it, and then you keep on casting it day after day after day, and promise, and the promises that the Lord will carry that for you. There's also one more, and I want to slow down, and I want to say this carefully, because there's somebody in the room right now who needs to hear this, and there's somebody else in the room probably who needs to stop believing a lie about this. Sometimes casting your anxiety on God means going and getting medical help. When Peter says cast your anxiety on God, he's not saying that anxiety is a failure of faith. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying that if you were just a little bit more spiritual or prayed a little bit harder, then you wouldn't struggle. You wouldn't have anxiety. You wouldn't have fear. He's not saying that. You're going to have those things. He's absolutely not saying that you shouldn't take anxiety medication. That's not what he's saying. If you are on medication for your mental health, hear me, that is okay. Keep doing that. The Bible is not telling you to stop. Your brain is an organ. It can get sick the same way that your heart or your thyroid can get sick. Anxiety and depression can be spiritual, and they can be about your circumstances, and they can also be a real physical, medical thing happening inside your body. And sometimes it's all of those things at once. Yay, the human condition. Taking medicine for those things is no more a lack of faith than setting a broken arm in a cast, or a diabetic taking insulin. God heals through doctors and counselors and medicine, and he's the one who gave us those things in the first place. And here's where it all comes right back around to pride, by the way. Sometimes the very thing keeping a person from getting help is pride. Sometimes you think, oh, I should be able to handle this. I'm going to white-knuckle my way through this. That is the same self-reliance we've been talking about this whole time. So going to a counselor or to a doctor, getting the help you need, it can be one of the most humble things that you can choose to do. Humbling yourself can be going to get help. Casting your care on God can also be using the people in your life around you to help carry it. So please hear this. This verse is a comfort. This verse is intended as a comfort. It is not a club that you should use to beat yourself up with when you're not doing it right. And I need to tell you why this isn't just theory for me, personally. Some of you have heard part of my story. A couple of years ago, I preached about divorce. I am divorced. I have a son. When he was 6 weeks old, his mom took him and left. For the years in between, since then, we tried to make it work the long way around. My now wife, Emily, and myself. He would come to visit us for long stretches in the summertime. We fought very hard to keep him in our lives, very hard. And then last year, my son turned 16 years old. This was April, well, he turned 16 at a different time, but in April 2025, he decided he was done. He didn't want to come see us anymore. Not only that, he doesn't even want to talk to us. He blocked my phone number. I haven't talked to my son for over a year. Last year was one of the hardest years of my life. And I'll be honest with you, last year, I did not cast that anxiety on God. I didn't know how. This is still a daily struggle for me. So please don't think that I'm up here like having everything figured out. I don't got it all together. But here's the part that's hardest for me specifically. I like challenges. I like problems that seem like they can't be solved, the unsolvable problem when someone says, that can't be done. And I say, watch me. Challenge accepted. That's my mindset. This is my mantra. But there's nothing I can do. I'm just stuck. I'm blocked. I can't outwork this. I can't outplan this. I can't make my son pick up the phone. And for someone wired like me, this is its own special kind of torture. There's nothing I can do. So when Peter says, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, I understand this now in a way that I couldn't before. Because sometimes God brings you to a wall that you can't climb. You can't walk around this wall. It's there. You're stuck. And the only option you have is the thing that Peter's been telling us this whole time. Stop trying to be the one who fixes it. But I want to be. But hand the weight to the God whose hands hold the universe. He can carry it. I promise. Here's why this matters. When you're worn down and you're carrying what you can't fix, this is exactly where the enemy wants to move. This is why Peter's very next words are a warning to us. Verse 8, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Now, sober-minded here is not about alcohol. The Greek word for this means keep a clear head. Be watchful. Be level-headed. Watchful. Stay awake. Stay on alert. Because there is a very real enemy, and he is on the hunt. But let me say something about that enemy, because we tend to get him wrong in two different directions. Some of us give the devil way too much credit. We blame the devil for every bad day, every headache, every flat tire. The devil is not God. He is not everywhere all at once. He cannot read your mind. He's not omnipotent. He's not omniscient. He is a created being on a leash. The devil cannot touch you without God's permission. We see that in the book of Job. But sometimes it's just easier to blame the devil than it is to face the truth. But James, the book of James says it straight. Each of us is tempted when we are dragged away by our own evil desire and enticed. Not the devil, our own evil desire. And a lot of the time, the thing pulling us down is not an attack from outside. It's the pride that's sitting in our own chest. Some of us then make the opposite mistake and say the devil is not real. He is very real. Verse 8 is not a metaphor. Be aware, not paranoid, not asleep, just clear-eyed and level-headed. But here's another thing I like about this. Peter says the devil is like a roaring lion. He's like one because that's a knockoff. He's a fake. There is a real lion, and it's not the devil. Jesus is the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the real lion. Have you ever thought about lions? A real hunting lion stalks in silence. They don't roar. The roar is a bluff. It's just noise meant to scare you. The devil, being a roaring lion, is loud because he's empty. There's nothing there. He can't save. He can't do anything. He's just yelling to scare you. And you want to know how the real lion won? Not by roaring, not by force. In Revelation, John turns to look at this conquering lion, and what he sees is a lamb looking like it had been slaughtered. The lamb who was slain. The lion, the real lion, won by laying down his life for us. This is the exact opposite of the enemy's loud grab for power. So how do we fight the devil? Verse 9, resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. You don't out-clever him. You just stand and you keep trusting God. And then Peter says something that you need to hear if you feel alone in your fight. The same suffering that you are experiencing today is happening to your brothers and sisters all around the world. You're not alone. You've got family everywhere in the same situation, fighting the same battles. So we've covered the challenge, humble yourself, and the encouragement, you're not alone. And now Peter finishes with the third thing, the promise. Verse 10 and 11. And after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. To him be the dominion forever and ever. Amen. So first, notice he doesn't pretend the suffering away. After you have suffered a little while, it's real. It's bounded. But when you're sitting in it, it doesn't feel like a little while. You might be in a season that feels like it's never ending. All I have is suffering. When will this end? That's how you feel. I'm sure many of you feel that way right now. But you know what? Next to eternal glory, even a whole lifetime of suffering is a tiny fraction, meaningless speck that we won't even remember once it's done. The pain is real, but it has an end. There's an end date on that suffering. And then look what God promises to do. 4 words: restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish. And they're not wishes, these are promises. And more importantly, he himself will do it. This is not something that's going to happen to you. God will do this. They are promises. The Greek word for restore here is to mend a torn net. Peter was a fisherman. He knew exactly what it was to sit there tying up a ripped net. And this is what God does with a torn up person. He mends the net. He puts you back together. Confirm, steady, to steady you, to prop you up so you don't fall over. Establish, to set you on a foundation, a house on the rock when the storm hits. And strengthen, this, I love this so much. The Greek word that Peter uses is nowhere else in the entire New Testament. This is the only time this word is used. It means God pours his strength into you, which is why Paul could say, when I am weak, then I am strong. Not because Paul dug deep and found more grit. No, because Paul ran out of his own strength. And that's where God's strength began. God literally poured his strength into Paul. Now remember verse 5, where God opposes the proud. Here's the flip side. He's not going to force his strength into somebody still insisting that they've got it handled. But the moment you humble yourself and admit, I don't got this, he will fill you with his strength, supernaturally. And look what Peter set side by side. Back in verse 8, the enemy came to devour you, to tear you apart. And then in verse 10, God comes to restore you, to put you back together, better than before. The false lion does not get the last word. God does. But church, I need you to hear this carefully. Peter promises that God will restore you. He does not promise that he will restore your circumstances. He doesn't promise that the hard thing you're walking through will disappear on this side of eternity. I wish. I pray for that. I hope for those things. But God doesn't promise me a phone call with my son. He doesn't promise me that I'll have a restored relationship with him. I pray for that. I long for that. But he promises something deeper and ultimately more certain, that the God of all grace has called us to eternal glory in Christ. And after we've suffered for just a little while, God himself will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish us. And that promise doesn't rest on how tightly you hold on to God. This is the beautiful part of this whole thing. It doesn't matter how hard you hold on to God. It matters how hard he holds on to us. Thank God for that. The chief shepherd suffered for his sheep, died for his sheep, rose for his sheep, and is coming again for his sheep. So humble yourselves under his mighty hand. Stand firm with your brothers and sisters and discover the living hope that Jesus offers to everyone who calls him Lord. Let's pray.